Hi, everybody. It's Matt from the At the End podcast. Right now, we're talking enforcing the fundamentals with Doug Harding. And I just wanted to do a real quick shout out here. Um, episode 3 may not be episode 3. There's some references in this show about what may happen. And I hadn't confirmed anything when we recorded episode 2, but it is now recorded, as is episode 3. But because of the timing of this, which I screwed up, I had my weeks mixed. Um, I may slide a bumper episode in between here because it's the beginning of the hockey season. And I really wanted to pick Doug's brain for those of you that are young coaches, sort of either stumbling ass backwards into it or jumping at the opportunity to actually get behind the bench and help out with your kids. Also, I want to pick his brain on how this start of the season can really be stressful for the kids that are really trying hard, but it's a really, honestly, in my opinion, a piss poor time to start putting athletics on top of going back to school. But we'll get into that in a future episode. So enjoy what we have to say. This is going to cover Doug's career in the early 80s in the Cowichan Valley Capitals, and his transition to the Nanaimo major junior team as well. There will be some stories about that. But one of the players mentioned heavily in this episode has agreed to come on. It is recorded, it's in the can, it's ready to go, and talk to us for an hour about how Doug impacted their career. And it was not a career to be brushed off lightly. It was a very good career in the NHL with some decent name value to it. And I cannot thank him enough for doing that. So enjoy this episode. And for whatever references may be made, give me a little break on this one and let me see if I can slide something that may help the young coaches and the young players out there do something with the beginning of their season. Okay, because that's really the goal of this, is to keep Doug's wisdom spreading out there and help uplifting somebody. Because a lot of the time it is just that one thing that is missing. That willingness to go 1 inch deeper in the mine that strikes gold. That one step farther that gets you to the top rung. And if this podcast only does that for one player on one level, the goal will be complete. Right now, just enjoy what you're about to hear. This is Doug transitioning from the Victoria Cougars to the Cowichan Valley Capitals and on into the Nanaimo Clippers / Islanders. And we won't quite finish the Islanders bit, but we will in the future. So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. And remember to find us at the End Podcast on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and at Enforcing the Fundamentals with Doug Harding on all of those as well. This is an At the End Studios production. I'm Matt, and here's Doug. Hi, welcome back. We are sitting back. We're talking with Doug. He's been coaching for 60 years. The last episode, we sort of left off in your assistant coaching position in Victoria in the late 70s through early 80s. So tell us a little bit more about what went on there.
Well, at the same time, I was working with player development with some of the Cougar kids. the Cougars team. Actually, I was coaching full time with Oak Bay Trios Junior B hockey team, and one of my co-coaches, one of the guys that I was working for, was pretty integral in getting me to, stay in hockey and keep moving on. But we coached together for, I guess, 3 years. His name is Dennis Farrell. He was a local realtor, and he was just a really good hockey guy. And he got in. He We coached together for 3 years. Then I coached another 3 years, and then he got involved with a group of people that were interested in getting a BC Junior Hockey League franchise, uh, which was in or they were trying to get the franchise set up in Esquimalt, but at the last minute, they couldn't get a lease on the ice in Esquimalt. So they looked around, and there was a brand new arena that was just built up in Duncan, in the Cowichan Valley, and they approached Ron. Now I'm trying to remember what Ron's last name is. This is a few years ago, who had been the director of recreation in Oak Bay. He was now the new regional director for the Cowichan Valley at the brand new arena, and Dennis and I both knew him. Dennis approached him on the representation of the group of owners in Victoria. That's how it got. Cowichan Capitals got to be named Capitals.
Mhm.
They didn't change the name. It was supposed to be the Esquimalt Capitals. So there's a little history for some hockey
Okay.
history buffs.
So that's kind of like how sort of the LA Lakers became the LA Lakers. They just didn't change the name when they moved out of Minnesota. So and
It's,
that's actually really cool.
exactly. And anyway, I coached another 3 years in Junior B, and then Dennis approached me. They'd had a coach who they had hired, but the coach from the time that they had started till the time they were getting ready to operate, this is all last minute, uh, had managed to spend their entire budget for the year before they'd ever been on the ice. So now he didn't steal it; he just spent it. He just spent it on a lot of exorbitant, what they considered exorbitant hockey things. And Dennis approached me, and he said, "Would you be interested in going up to Cowichan to coach the new team that we've just bought, in the BC Junior Hockey team?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm working a full time job. Plus, I'm doing the Junior Bs. Plus, I'm doing, seasonal and development opportunities with higher end kids. Not only Cougars kids, but there were other kids that were local kids that actually went on to have NHL careers who were not old enough at the time." So he said, "Well, we're really kind of stuck because we really don't have a coach." And I said, "Well, if you provide me with some transportation, I'll do it as long as you need it or until you find a replacement." And actually, Fraser McCall was also one of the owners, one of the group of owners. And at that time, he didn't own the Cougars. He bought them that year, though. He was also involved. And anyway, so their president approached me. He said, "I've got a car for you, and we'll pay for the gas." Um, so I went to my boss at my regular job, and I said that I was going to be taking on a coaching opportunity, and my boss was actually an old playing mate of mine from senior hockey, and he said, "Oh, that's you'll love that." I said, "Yeah," and he said, "We wanted to know how much I was going to be paid," and I said, "Oh, well, they're going to give me this much," and then that's just sort of made up the difference. It was about what I was making where I was making before. So we were off to Cowichan, and I had 3 days to get set up for their first tryout camp, which was in and around about the first week in September. We started hockey seasons a little later in those days. Everybody wanted to get the long weekend out of the way before they started. And we had 180 kids registered to come and try out with the Cowichan Valley Capitals.
Okay, so I vaguely recall your probably your last season with the Cougars. I definitely recall many car trips, probably to give mom a break, where it's like take this fucking child elsewhere, and just going up and back to Cowichan, doing stuff in the rink. Um, Now, just on a side note, am I remembering this correctly? That arena would eventually become home to the giant stick and puck from Expo '86, would it
That's
not?
it.
Wasn't it?
That's
Yeah,
the
it got
one.
yeah, it got slapped out there, and it's right on the island highway there as you go through Duncan,
It
or
was
Cowichan. Yeah.
it was actually it was a really nice arena. It was a brand new arena, just opened. Uh, the kind of interesting part is that the Vancouver Canucks were holding their training camp there at their first year opening as well. So I got to meet quite a few of the Canucks and some of their management people and some of the press people who were wandering around the building. And the Canucks were quite. They really wanted us to be involved. Local junior team, new
Mhm.
franchise. I used to referee their morning scrimmage because it wasn't considered very important, but their afternoon or their evening scrimmages, everybody in the community piled into their. I at that time I think it was a little over 2,000 people would pile in to watch the Canucks scrimmage at nighttime, but there were kids there that I knew that were from the Victoria Cougars who had been drafted by the Canucks, and I got to meet quite a few of the new people and watching them and their approach and watching the players' approach and their mental attitudes played a big part of my being able to pass along some of the things that I learned. Uh, it was a fantastic experience. I got to travel with Canucks coaches when they traveled back to the Lower Mainland after, because we were going over for an exhibition a game on the Lower Mainland, and it was a pretty wonderful experience. I've been around pros before, but never more than at a sort of introductory playing level and being involved in, you know, the day-to-day organization, what it takes to be able to successfully put pro hockey players on the ice was really an enlightening situation.
So now, just to put a timeline in advance here, we're talking early early '80s.
One.
Yeah, '81.
Yep.
So you're just barely 31 years old. You've gotten this. Yeah, yeah, don't do the math on that. You've gotten this head coaching position. You're now being exposed to the NHL level position and being able to pick brains and sit in on uh, coaching. I don't want to say meetings so much, but
No, no, no. Never
just the
on meetings, but just
conversations, just
hanging
being able to
around and
pick
being around
brains.
and having coffee and
Hmm.
talking to the trainers and listening to the players talk, and it was uh, it was all pretty good. I don't think they appreciated my refereeing skills though, because I don't think I'd ever refereed a game ever in my life, and I do know that those situations were very, very important for the players, how they
Hmm.
played, what they did when they're on the ice all the time. And if the referee was missing offsides and penalties, uh, players got pretty upset about that. I mean, it was a very intense situation for them, and that's when I kind of realized that we might consider it just a morning warm up scrimmage, but they didn't. They considered it. What I do right here, right now, might will be seen by the entire staff, and
Hmm.
what I do in these games can make a difference. So, a few questionable calls resulted in some angry people.
So you know what? That's probably good training for just having. I don't want to say just blaming the ref, but having that one game where just nothing seems to go your way. It always seems to happen in like the key playoff game somewhere, or the key clincher down the line somewhere. But it sounds like you're able to be exposed to, being able to pick brains, or just be a fly on the wall and listen to stuff. And being the ref, would you say it would be fair that not being the best ref would kind of run the risk of letting these guys fall into bad habits? Like if you're consistently missing like an offside, it leads to them going, well, this was never called before. Why is this ref here calling us? We go, well, now you're in the NHL.
Yeah.
Now we have the refs there, so I can see where that would be important. Um, so you've stepped up. You're in. How long were you in the coach role in Cowichan? Because it all blends together for me. I know you did the back and forth for several years.
Yes.
Yeah.
3.
Um, so how many years exactly was it? I think, did you say 3?
Yeah, it was 3.
I don't remember if you said it just since we've recorded, or you said it when we were talking before I hit the record button. But so it was 3 years there. Did you have any other mentors that you were going to in those 3 years as a head coach? Somebody you could turn around and ask questions to? Not so much, with you, because I mean, having the Canucks there is obviously a huge opportunity, as we've covered. But was there somebody that, like, mid-season you could, turn around and have a conversation like, this is, I'm not getting something here. There's something. How do I correct this? Was there anybody like that?
Yeah, probably Dennis Farrell again, the guy who talked me into actually going up there. Like I said, Dennis was an exceptional hockey guy, an exceptional friend. He had a really good understanding of the game. We had a staff of people. Of course, we had 10 owners that all knew that they had the answers. But we were very fortunate in Cowichan, and we had the answer right from the get-go. We we had the opportunity because we were a brand new franchise. The opportunity came up that we couldn't recruit highly sought after hockey players because nobody wanted to go to a new franchise for fear of every. As expected, we weren't supposed to win a game, hardly all year long. We were expected to be just pounded into the sea. But we had set up a relationship with a major junior team, which was, we considered ourselves, yes, we want kids going to college, but we were more of a development team. I had some major junior connections, and one of our owners bought a major junior franchise. And I was introduced to a fella who was scouting we were working with Spokane. We made a development deal with Spokane, and they were kind of struggling at the time. And our deal was that we would take a number of players, not a whole lot, but a number of and they said, well, you don't have to win winnings. We want you to take really young, developable players that are, none of them were age eligible in terms of they were all coming in a year under with their last year of midget hockey or lower. And we were really fortunate. We got sent 7 players, of which 2 I returned because I wanted to keep local players because they'd had a pretty substantial and pretty successful junior B team in the area. And we recruited a lot of the junior B players that hadn't been given opportunities in the Victoria area. But we were really young. We had an age, although we had a few older players, that was in and around 16 and a half years old. For a 20-year-old league, everybody just took a look at our roster and said, you're going to get absolutely hammered. And as it turned out, those players that we had picked up Uh, all five players played major junior hockey, and three of them went on to be pretty exceptional NHL hockey players. So we only lost, I think, 11 games in the entire year. And we lost them all on the road. At home with the Cowichan Recreation Center, it was a huge arena compared to the area sizes of most of the arenas, even in the area. We were 100 by 200, and that was considered to be, yep, that's the boys.
Yeah,
That
so
was,
I just want to, I don't want to interrupt too much
yep.
here, but for those of you that are listening to this on Apple or Spotify, go back and check our YouTube if you want to see Doug speak. But or also for this moment, I have found a photo of the Cowichan Valley Capitals from '81. So I recognize this one dude up here that seems to be taking a cue from Don Cherry in the blue just murdered the couch suit. Nice mustache there. And I do recognize one other player. This gentleman right here, a very young Jeff Courtnall, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Um, is there anybody else you can pick out there that you
Yeah,
remember? Any names?
Dean Evison, who's the coach of the Minnesota North Stars, is there. That's Dean, third in from the top,
Right
and
there.
no, the other side. That's Danny Hodgson.
That's
Uh,
Danny Hodgson. That's Dean.
that's Dean Evison.
Dean right here. Danny
Yeah,
Hodgson over here. That's
yeah.
fantastic. Names that, and I remember these guys. I mean, I remember not so much Danny. I definitely remember Dean. I definitely remember Jeff, but we can get into that
You
story
should.
later. Um, and what about your fellow coaches here? Who do we got? We got a leather jacket and a gray tie here on the far left.
That's Randy Vagno, and he was probably the only local Duncan guy who, right from the beginning, got really involved in the franchise, because the franchise did had a few problems. We took over the spot for the Sunday afternoon senior hockey league in Duncan, and we actually got picketed for our first three games by this group. But Randy played; he kind of played in that league, and he 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 came right out in the press and said he thought it was disgraceful. We have this opportunity to bring this team here, and it's great hockey, and that he stood up for the team. And after the locals watched us play our first three games, then it was all ahead full. We got really good, strong support from the community. As far as the small community goes. Um, so Randy was right up there. One of the reasons that we didn't, or one of the reasons that we did make it in the community. So, and we had quite a few local players. The two goalies were both Duncan boys. We had a couple of Nanaimo boys. We had some Victoria boys. Danny was from Spruce Grove, Alberta, and Dean was from Brandon, and Glenn Golka, who was a famous football player and wrestler. I don't know what he wrestled under, but do you remember? Matt? I've lost you. Matt?
Sorry. Yeah. No. There we are. My bad. Click the button. So yeah,
Where was I?
Glenn pops up in the
Golka.
'90s podcast. I don't remember. I don't know exactly where I hit the mute button on myself, but is Glenn in this photo somewhere?
Yes, he is. He's
Now,
standing right next to Jeff Courtnall.
yeah, that's what I thought. I was looking at that going, I know this guy's face. I was
Mm-hmm.
relatively sure. So for those that are sort of looking, he is right behind the second
Jim
coach from
Moody,
the
who was
left.
the president.
So he's the president. Okay, so our next suit in the front row, that's the president of the team. Right behind him is
Yes,
uh, is Glenn Kalka, and then Jeff Courtnall to Glenn's
yes,
left. And the president of the team is sitting right between our assistant captain and our captain in a
yes.
much less safety oriented colored suit than the bright blue. Uh, okay, so he was the president of the team. How was working with him?
He was great. Like some of the owners, I wasn't a very good first year head coach for owners, and with a semi general manager position, because I kind of did what I thought was going to be the best for the players, and
Hmm.
there were considerable economic concerns when you're beginning a new franchise, especially when your entire budget is wiped out before you ever go to the ice the first time, which included payment on equipment and all
Hmm.
the rest of it. So it was, I really like Jim. And I got Jim's personal car. He gave me
Oh,
one of his personal cars to drive back and forth
was
every
that the
day.
big white one?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
that
remember that
was.
car. I
Yeah.
remember that car.
Yeah. It was,
Okay. And then finally, we're going to skip past you because we've already discovered. And then in the gray suit, in the front row, all the way over next to our goalie, who are we dealing with there?
oh, gosh. Um, he was actually our player development. He's the one I went to Spokane to talk with
Mhm.
Spokane about uh, doing a deal for development for players for their level. And yeah, he's going to kick my butt if he's still here, but I can't remember the name. He wasn't at the beginning of the season. He was around a lot, and I would always get messages for him. Great job, great job. The ownership is not happy you're winning, and when you're not listening to them. So
And that must be a double edged sword. It's like they want to be listened to, but at the same time, well, they keep winning. So I can understand that where some frustration would be. And then finally, right behind our unfortunately misnamed player development, we have a gentleman in a tie that seems to have been cut from the same fabric as your suit.
he was our trainer,
Ah,
and
the
he was
trainer.
our publicist, and
Okay.
he I believe he actually owned a photo business, and one of his people are the people who shot this picture. It was actually a promotional picture done for a calendar that we
Okay.
put out. So it had I might even have one of those calendars around. But
Oh, that would be
again, is
fantastic.
somebody I saw in the beginning who was probably being paid, and then after everybody stopped being paid, uh, we didn't see him quite as much. But
Mm,
yeah,
funny how
it
that
was.
works out, right?
Yeah, it was. You know what? There's only silly people like myself who will stay in there, and Randy, and Jim. Well, mind you, Jim had the responsibility of paying the bills, but you can't pay him if you're not making it. So,
Right.
but
I mean, it's
yeah, the, it was such a great year. Actually, all 3 years were pretty good years, but money was a big issue because I think I was paid on time, probably 3 times in the first 2 years. The rest was all came, but it came late or it came in NSF checks or that got
oh.
replaced. So that really made your mom mad.
Yeah, because 81, you would have had, you would have had to feed me. And I'm a picky eater. I probably started that way. And then, as you get sort of towards the midpoint, just into early 81, you have diapers to buy for my little brother. So I can
Yes.
imagine it gets a little stressful when the paycheck goes no. Um,
Yeah, it was, you know what? I think that a couple of people at a couple of times in the ownership group, again, probably thanks to Dennis Farrell and probably Jim, uh, made that up out of their own pockets. Because if you have a group of 10 owners, Mel Bridgman's dad was also an owner in the team. He bought the team a bus, which we traveled in an old Prevost. And he was a really good guy. They were all really good guys, but to get 10 guys to make uh, in unison um, what do I want to say here? To get 10 guys to sit down and agree to spending money when some didn't want to spend money, some were wondering why we weren't, doing a whole lot better. But it's like I said, it all came down to in that first year, our fan support was actually pretty good. But if you're starting at zero, it's pretty hard go to.
Oh, absolutely. And for those that don't know, Cowichan Valley or Duncan is located midway between Nanaimo and Victoria, BC, on Vancouver Island. It's one of those towns where you can stop for gas. It's bigger than it looks as you zip through the highway, but it isn't huge. So I imagine having a team that is functioning at this level, especially when it is functioning at a level with players of the age that can support the Vancouver Canucks training camp, was a huge deal. So that's pretty cool for a small town. In it doesn't matter what sport you're in. If you can have a local team that is able to support that kind of big league dream, even if you're just a little cog in the wheel, it's got to be one of those things where it's a point of pride.
Yeah. Um, am I back?
You're back. Your screen's a little
Okay.
frozen, but we have the audio, so keep going.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no. It on top of that, yeah, Duncan is a logging town, and this is in the big economic crash of '81. So people that did come, and we had a pretty strong. I would say it was a stronger support base probably now than what they have now in the league. Like we were getting some pretty decent numbers. We got kind of lucky in the scheduling, which made it hard for people to come and see us, which really worked to our benefit. But Nanaimo was by far probably the biggest and fastest team.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the most physical team, and they'd have to come in and play Nanaimo on Saturday night, and then Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock they'd have to come to Duncan to play us. And we were a considerably different team. I would say, we were very high skilled. We had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of exceptional young talent that did some pretty incredibly creative things as far as being on the ice. We didn't lose a game at home all season long. Dude, Nanaimo would beat them up on Saturday, and we would just skate them to death on Sunday. So it worked out. It worked out pretty good. It was so Sunday afternoon, hockey night or hockey afternoon in Duncan. It was
Mm-hmm.
it was a good thing.
Yep. And just for anybody wondering that is watching this on YouTube, the photo credit I'm going to give there is to the Facebook page. It's actually a group, the Cowichan Valley Capitals Alumni Group. Found that photo as I was going through stuff, popped up on Google, and then it actually asked to tag people. So I did end up tagging people as we were talking through there as well. So you've been tagged in that on Facebook. You'll get a notification. Danny Hodgson, Dee Vivas, and Jeff Courtnall, they probably all won't get notifications, but I mean, it just felt good to really, help identify people in this photo for those nostalgic um, fans out there in the Cowichan Valley. Um, yeah, so Cowichan Valley, 3 years in, you had that first year going. The second and third year, how did those turn out for you?
Well, the
Was it,
second year was a really exceptional year. We'd lost a few players, but we were fortunate enough you know, to replace them with pretty good hockey players. I think that we were probably, we didn't get to play against the interior division in those days, but I think we were probably the top team in the league for, well, until playoff time. So um, we, I think we finished first in the league. Uh, I would say we were probably an older team. We Some of the younger players that we did have moved on to first year opportunities in the Western Hockey League,
mm-hmm.
and we replaced those. Actually, they were replaced with more local older kids. But we were the team to beat in the BC Junior Hockey League, and that was the team that had the first opportunity to travel to Europe. Not
Okay, so
much.
I've just clicking on this photo here again. I've actually unlocked some of the older comments. Do you remember a man named Daryl Waverlick?
Yeah, Waverlick. Yes, I certainly
Waverlick.
do.
He's got a
Yes,
bunch of comments in here, and he seems to be sitting in the top row between Dave Evison and Marty Irvine. Um,
yes,
so some of the names that he's thrown out there: Tony St. Dennis, Tracy Patterson, Brian Burley, Steve
yes.
Salva, Dave Branting, Rod Jameson, Glenn Holka. I'm gonna assume
Oh,
he just typoed that one.
yeah.
No idea. Uh, yeah, he's got question marks there, so he was a little he flubbed that one. But
He did. He's doing great.
Jeff Courtnall, Len Meyer, uh,
Yes,
Misko Antison.
yes.
That's there. There's your trainer right there.
There,
Um, then Barry Tuck, Al Gooding, Dan Hudson, Nick Nasham, Dean
Nasham.
Avison, and then he's standing next to Dean and Marty Irvine and Dennis O'Brien.
Those are, you know what? Those are great, great kids too. I, probably our biggest loss in an older kid was Mr. O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
He played that first year, and he was certainly our for having a lot bigger kids. He was certainly our toughness leader. Uh, he just delivered some devastating hits when he was on the ice. So for those people on other teams who were watching or weren't watching, they were sorry for it. But he had been an adopted baby from
Mm-hmm.
Germany, and he returned to Germany the next year. And I understand that he actually had a pretty decent career, kind of playing over in Germany hockey. And some of the local players that you named, Len Myers and they were all exceptional players. Like this was a exceptionally talented group of kids, and to come from mostly junior B leagues where they weren't being given chances at junior A leagues, and the junior A league there was only Nanaimo um, as a BC Junior Hockey League franchise there. And I actually, for a couple of years before going to Cowichan, did some work with Larry McNabb. And I found most people found Larry to be a pretty gruff guy in terms of the style of play of his hockey teams, but he was one of the toughest minor pro hockey players, in history. I think a number of times Don Cherry referred to him as the only guy he ever played of that he was afraid of. But he was such a good guy. He really was. And
Mm-hmm.
as hard as hard as it was to play against his teams, he was I extended my hand to him before I got to Cowichan, and he always extended his hand back. He tried to murder us a few times, but that was only on the ice. Larry and his brother Cliff were, I was to develop a pretty good relationship with them in terms of support in the years that I spent in Nanaimo after. So um, it
Okay,
was it
so
was
now we mentioned Nanaimo a couple of times. So your time here in Cowichan does come to an end after.
yes,
So I guess we're looking at 84, which probably the 84, 85 season or 83, 84.
83, 84. Yeah,
Okay. So that's when your
I
commute
think
got a lot easier because for 3 years you commuted up. We never lived in Cowichan or Duncan. It was always the commute up.
yeah,
Um,
it was the car
so
with the gas paid for.
That's well, and you know what? That makes so much sense now. Granted, not the cars were not really good on gas back then as a rule. And as I've told these stories over the years, like I can't believe he'd just do that. And gas was a lot cheaper than it is today. It's like that's a hell of a commute to do this for. And I honestly I didn't remember how many years it was. I think I at one point looked you up on one of the internet hockey database or something like that and figured out it was 3 years. But we relocate from Victoria to Nanaimo. So what was the transition there between the two teams? What was the spark? How did all that go? Because I mean, I was in the kindergarten. So all I knew is I was leaving the house I grew up in, my nana up the street, and moving to a new school in a town 2 hours up the road. So what sparked all that? What was the transition like?
Oh, transition was I loved it there. It was great. I mean, some people said I could have run for mayor, and I would have given the mayor, who was a pretty good guy, he was very supportive, a hard run. But it was just basically the economics of it. The leadership was changing, the group was changing. They were spending less if you could, and I'd gone for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months without a paycheck. And but my gas was still being paid for, and I was still driving the car, and I had a little bit of savings put away. And then we had run a camp that the beginning of the year, where the new franchise that had been moved from Billings, Montana, to Nanaimo with an ownership group to set up a major, would be Vancouver Island's second major junior franchise, the Nanaimo Islanders. They're Riel Turcotte and uh, Mark Zeitlin's dad. I'm sorry, Mark Zeitlin's dad. I can't remember your name, but he was the major owner there,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd run a camp with them. And then we took some of the players that they didn't want to send back. Well, I wouldn't say unfortunately, but they wanted all their kids that they figured couldn't make their team um, to stay in Canada. They were all young U.S. kids, and nothing against the young U.S. kids, but it's a whole different hockey market playing in a Canadian Junior A league as opposed to playing midget hockey. And although, you know, Michigan and Minnesota had some pretty good hockey. Um, anyway, we set up a fairly uh, good relationship. The Cougars had kind of changed. Jack Shoup was not gone, or was gone. Dave Andrews, who was a schoolmate of mine from Nova Scotia, had taken over as the head coach, and Fraser McCall was running the franchise. Well, as the owner, he he we just sort of drifted apart. Um, So the Nanaimo people asked me if I'd come to their camp and evaluate while I was doing our camp. And then when the camps closed up, we switched some players around, and again it was a little bit of a question of economics and the fact that they started the season with probably one of the best um, rosters, and the ownership, the U.S. ownership, basically took it apart to bring in U.S. younger kids. And it was supposed to be one of the top franchises in the Western Hockey League. And they started off their season, and I think they won 1 or 2 games.
Or are you still with me?
A representative.
Okay, hold,
And
I'm going to pause you for just a
yep,
second. We had a bit of a technical glitch, so if you could back up maybe to the end, beginning of your last little sentence there, we kind of lost you for a second.
okay, I'm trying to remember where I was.
Okay, I've screwed the whole thing up.
Old. uh, were we talking about Real?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, one of the other ownership, small ownership parts was Real Turcotte, and they hired a coach. They fired the coach. The ownership moved the general manager into the coaching job. The Real took over as general manager. Then they fired the coach that they had, and Real, we set up a pretty good relationship. A couple of young players there that I really liked. There were a couple of U.S. kids, Pat LaFontaine's brother, John, Alfie Turcotte. They were exceptional young players, and anyway, they came to me and they said, well, we want you to come and work with us. Would you be willing to do that? Just the economics of it and the difference between no pay at all and, $4,000 a month was huge in 1984, whenever it
Right.
was. So I really disliked leaving Cowichan, probably because it had been pretty good for me. The people had been pretty good for me. Players had played pretty well. We were a third or fourth year team. We were back to really young hockey players. Actually, we had quite a few kids from the Burnaby Winter Club midget team that won the nationals that were there for a while. And I decided that it was best for the family that I move. I wouldn't have to travel back and forth. At the time, we hadn't decided whether you and your mom and your brother would be living in Nanaimo or in Victoria, but you guys stayed in Victoria, and I went to Nanaimo, and it got a little better. But between the time of me agreeing, I said, "Look, I have, I can't just leave." So I went to Dennis and I told Dennis, and he said that it was a really good move. That he wasn't quite sure what was going on with the rest of the ownership, so I should take the job. So I did, and we went there. But it was a really tough hockey decision for me because things had been building pretty good. Uh, when I got to Nanaimo, it started to change around. We actually won 13 or 14 games in the next 25 or 26 games. But the problem was between the time that I had agreed to take the job and the time that I did was a 3-week period of time. In that 3-week period of time, and again, a motivated, I'm not sure how it came, but we traded away 6 hockey players that had been with the team when they were doing well in Bellings and to other Western Hockey League franchises, and all 6 of them turned out to be super NHL hockey players, that had long NHL careers. So that was a tough bite. We were already losing, and now we're traded away a bunch of kids. And
I
credit
just I just
sort of,
want to I
yeah,
just want to clarify one thing. Now these kids came with the team and were in Nanaimo for a little while, or they
yep,
went. Okay,
yep, yep,
so they moved. They came from Billings, Montana, to Nanaimo, BC, on the east coast of Vancouver Island. For those of you that may be listening and not super firm on the geography, um, do you remember which these kids were?
Do I remember them?
I bet you do.
Yeah, I do. I remember quite a few of them, but the two that, one I knew especially was Bob Rouse. And I mean, Bob won 4 or 5 Stanley Cups. He was played 17 years. One of the other ones that I was really sorry to see go was Mark Lamb. I never had a chance to talk to these guys about, look, it'll be different here.
Hmm.
It's not going to be what it was. It can be, but and they traded away 3 or 4 more players, and
And you
and
just never really got a chance to really work with them at all.
not with that group of
Yeah.
kids. Like that would have been considerably different. That team, I think, could have challenged for. Although I don't know how their start got so bad because probably, well, I'm not going to make guesses as to why they do or they don't, but their start was really poor. A lot of it was these kids were still in NHL training camps too.
Hmm.
They hadn't returned to the club, and but the players went to the ownership, and these players, and they said that they didn't want to be there. That it wasn't. It wasn't a hockey atmosphere that
Hmm.
they. I don't know what had fallen apart, but it wasn't an atmosphere that they wanted to be in. But it was a shame. I would have loved to a chance to, at least. But so they were all moved before I got there.
Now,
And
could it have been that just looking geographically? I mean, Vancouver Island, especially back in that day, it's not easy to get on and off of. Nanaimo was a ferry port, but that's still a an hour and a half, 2 hour ferry ride to get to a major airport. So, could that have been a sort of a consideration that if something were to pan out, it's a lot more difficult to get out of Nanaimo than it is, say, a Billings, Montana, or something on the mainland? You, would that
I,
have been?
you know, I guess that might be part. I don't really see that as being part. They just weren't. Those particular players were not happy with, seeing their coach from Billings get fired and their
Mhm.
general manager that they'd had get fired, and they just it was new. Riel Turcotte was not a new hockey guy, and neither was Mr. Zeitlin, but it was a different hockey situation.
Mhm.
It's very tough for both men because they're buying this franchise to I mean they brought John LaFontaine and they missed by a hair bringing Pat with them. What kind
Ooh.
of a difference would that have made to have Jimmy Magoo, who was there, who was the Western Hockey League's all-time career high scorer, and Pat LaFontaine and Alfie Turcotte all on the same team. It just didn't stick together. And so guys like Mark Lamb and Rob Rouse and Bob Rouse, sorry, Bob, leave. They just
Mhm.
wanted a better hockey situation for themselves. I think Mark went to Medicine Hat, Bob went to Lethbridge, and they had really good Western Hockey League careers after that. They'd had good ones before, but it was kind of a shame both for the city of Nanaimo, me, and everybody else that we couldn't have that franchise couldn't have continued on from where it had been in Billings. But they had Dave King as a coach there too. So I mean, how much better does that get?
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, it sounds like not just geographically, um, but maybe a bunch of loyalty as well to the
yeah,
coaches and the management. And as cool as it would have been to have had those guys, at the same time, you got to probably have to respect that a little bit. Of it's nice when you know I don't want to say employees, but people that are part of a team or a workplace go, well, if he goes, I go. And so
yeah,
there is part of that, even though it is detrimental to, the next stage of development, the next stage of life for the team.
that's 100% correct. I mean, when a group of your players, and I've discovered that over the history. Fortunately, yeah, generally I'm on the better side. If your player group is unhappy and you don't seem to be able to satisfy both team and personal goals, then usually it starts to deteriorate fairly rapidly, and it deteriorated in losses. Like I
Hmm.
said, there's a number of players who, in the beginning of the season, weren't back, and I think I'm not sure if they won a game or they might have won one game in the first 24 games. And there's nothing with an unhappy group that destroys it any faster than losing, because
Hmm.
it's just that at the time was the nature. I would
Hmm.
hope that today, losing wouldn't make as much difference as rebuilding and making it better and finding out ways to make it better. But that was what the situation was in Nanaimo. Yeah, being on the island, not being in the prairies, their friends unhappy, losing games. Um, like I said, I wished I'd had a shot at trying to keep it together, but it was all gone. Like
Hmm.
after my second week, with a week left to go there, it came out in the newspaper that Rob Rouse and 5 or 6 other players had been traded from Nanaimo to other franchises. And I didn't know any of the hockey players coming in. But it gets worse.
Yeah, no, Nanaimo had some serious off the ice issues as well. There was one major thing which we will cover in depth down the road, But I've just now remembered another incident, and I'm thinking this is probably your two or three. Um, you lost a player in a car accident.
Yes, that was after. This is a few
Mm-hmm.
years that will come in the future. It doesn't really affect the timeline of the major junior franchises, but
Yeah,
probably
but
one of the
that's
saddest
like
days that I had ever experienced. And we'll
no,
talk about that later in the
yeah,
time.
we can talk about that. We'll probably, I mean, we're running close to an hour right now, so we'll sort of stick to the first couple of years because, and I know that there's a definite there's a definite dark cloud that hung over the town and hung over our house directly because I mean in this car accident there was guys that were billeted with us that I knew. I saw them every day, and it was difficult to understand at my young age in the second or third grade or probably even younger than that where this guy's in the hospital, this guy's gone. Um, but we can get into that a little bit further down the road. So
That's
you've started the rebuilding thing, and you're mentioning that it sounds like with the the rebuild of having to fill these six slots, it it kind of it hung over. It kind of put a question mark on, I guess, the excitement of the city to have this team show up. Um, would you losing so consistently has to be a morale problem, no matter what the reason is, because it's one thing to be knowing you're going into a rebuild year. I mean, you've had some considerable success with young teams. I mean, we were just discussing Cowichan had no reason to win as much as they did in that first year. There was no good goddamn reason for the brand new franchise to come in there and win as much as they did, aside from the fact that that team clicked on every level they needed to. And Nanaimo seemed to be almost the opposite of that. Would that be sort of fair to say?
yeah, it's 100%. I mean, everybody in college and wanted to be there. They were, making choices to be there. Were with the major junior franchise, the Islanders in Nanaimo. Most people did not want to be there. Eventually,
Mm-hmm.
a month or so later, after we got back and we'd won about half the games that we
Mm-hmm.
played after I got there. And then the general manager, who was Riel Turcotte, um, realized probably that this wasn't the best situation for his son to be in, traded
Mm-hmm.
him to Portland. And
Ooh.
for me, that was the devastating step of
Mm-hmm.
this is really kind of not going, you know, to be a comeback and make it a successful season, even
It's not
partially.
going to be that Disney movie storyline,
No, it was
right?
not going to be that Disney
It's
movie.
not the Mighty Ducks. It's not the
Yeah,
Miracle on Ice.
yeah.
It's a
Alfie
little closer to
Turcotte.
something you'd see on
Alfie
AMC.
Turcotte was an amazing hockey player. And not that I blame his dad. His dad is
Mm-hmm.
taking care of his son and trying to do the best that he could for the franchise. He traded away who I considered an exceptional hockey player, but he did get a couple of players from Portland who were pretty decent hockey players. One was an exceptional character player, Griffiths. And the unfortunate part is the other two players in the trade decided they didn't like it in Nanaimo and went home. So
Ooh,
gives you a little
that's
short again.
that's a little unprofessional. I mean, I can understand not liking it someplace and going, "Can I get another trade?" But to just go home, like,
No, they just kind of gave up on it. And you know what? I again, you can see their reasoning. They've come from Portland, who is just an outstanding hockey team. They have
mm-hmm,
so many NHL hockey players, future NHL hockey players on that team, to playing in Nanaimo, who, have just now won 12 games, although they'd won 12 in their last 24. They had just won 12 games. After Alfie after Real had traded Alfie, I think we only won another 2 games because most of the players realized that you know it just wasn't going to work out. So it was hard. It was hard on kids like Pat LaFontaine, who tried his best, and Ralph Bechtel, who was a goaltender there. Pokey Reddick was a goaltender there. I mean, we played Pokey to death. Like I don't know how he played so many hours.
I don't know. That sounds a little hokey to me. Sorry, I couldn't
Yeah.
resist. I
So
was sitting on the other street and I
Hokey
couldn't
Pokey.
resist.
Give me the Hokey Pokey. Yeah, Pokey's a great guy, and he's gone on to do so much youth hockey development, and he had a decent, you know, pro career in Las Vegas. I've seen Pokey 4 or 5 times over the last 10 or 12 years, and he's like me. It's all about doing the best he can for kids and building a program, and yet I'm really proud of the stuff that some
Okay.
of those
You know
guys
what?
have.
He sounds like somebody maybe we should see if we can get in contact with. Maybe we can do a have him join us one day. I am looking at having commented on that photo from Couch, and I've actually, as you've been talking, reached out to a bunch of folks then Cowichan saying, hey, we're doing a thing. If anybody would like to join us and discuss some Cowichan or just reconnect with Doug, please let me know. So if you're listening to this and you have somehow gotten this down the wire and you have been under Doug's tutelage, it doesn't matter if you're the Victoria Cougars, Cowichan Valley Capitals, or North Delta, whatever. If you were in the Langley program, if at any point you were under Doug's tutelage, reach out, drop me a line on Facebook, or send me an email at theinpod@gmail.com and let me know. Um, by all means, if you Doug is on Facebook, he's not the most technically savvy, so he will eventually accept
I
your friend
speak a little
request,
better than I handle a keyboard.
or just reach out to me. It is Matt Harding. I am on Facebook. I'm not that difficult to get a hold of, but you cannot see my you can't see a lot of my profile, but I look pretty much the same. I just have a dog in my profile picture, and just let me know you'd be interested in talking about this. So the last thing, what I'd like to finish on is we started this whole thing discussing your approach to the mental game. What was sort of the mental state of you? Like, you had a good amount of success in college and coming out the gate. Um, you had that amazing opportunity to be around a professional franchise in your first go round as a head coach. What was the difference? How did you deal with the fact that Nanaimo was a 180-degree turn? What was your headspace there? Because I was really too young to remember. I was too busy running around the backyard, the green belt, the little swamp there, tearing up the golf course at the end of the trail out the back door, and quite frankly, playing in my absolute new favorite playhouse, which was the team bus that was parked in the empty lot next door, which I wasn't allowed to do, but I did all the time.
Yeah. um, I was devastated. As an athlete, I had experienced pretty much nothing but success as a hockey player, rugby player, football player, playing golf. I mean, boxing. It didn't matter what it did. I was successful at it. And Cowichan was a huge success story. Like for me, that's for the young players and the whole situation starting in there, that it wasn't my success, and this is what I'm beginning to learn. I've come from an athlete where it's my success, baseball, all to in hockey where I'm beginning to realize that it's more about the success of the player, and now I I felt like basically, that I was letting them, there was something that I could do because I'd had so much success that there had to be something that I could do, and there wasn't. It probably for the first time in my life wasn't working out, athletically, the way I imaged it and perceived that it should be. Like I was feeling like pretty miserable failure, and yet it Islanders experience was hard, but I started to make some excuses too. Excuses is these players were traded and that player was traded and this player doesn't get along with this, and I for a couple of years it was just a mental war with myself, and I couldn't see, which is something that I've always been able to see, the positive side of doing something and seeing it turn out right. What I didn't realize that there's a long term. Things may not go right today. They may not even go right for this week, but there's another day coming. And for a player who is unhappy or a coach who's not feeling successful, yeah, that day is coming. So you need to be planning for the success days. And there was this 2 or 3 years in Nanaimo where were great learning circumstances. For the first time in my life, I probably wasn't appreciated very much where I was either. I don't think I had a whole lot of friends in the Nanaimo area, and I felt bad about that too. So it was time to get back to the way I had thought most of my life. Look forward to success, and the success will come. Sometimes it just doesn't come in the time that you wish it would. And over the years, I've studied and learned about as many different routes to success, of, and then tried to pass it along with players that are struggling. Tried to make them understand. Sometimes it's really hard to make somebody understand success, especially if they're in the middle of failure. Um, but it's something that I endeavor to do, and I've found a way to help as many people as I can. They have to understand that every day is a different day, and if today wasn't the day that you wanted or that you needed, then maybe tomorrow is. So prepare for that. It's coming. So I guess that's been a general philosophy for me for a long time. And my biggest lessons learned were learned in those years, uh, probably in Nanaimo. That it's you have to find your own success. You have to move towards those successes. And I've seen hard times. I've seen you have hard times, and Greg have hard times, and people around me have hard times. And a lot of those times, although it doesn't seem to affect me, really affect me. Like I wished there was more that I could do. And that's kind of how I felt in those years in Nanaimo. I just felt like, why can't I help? Why can't I make this better? And it was my own attitude that kept me from doing that. So,
I can't think of a better stop to this episode than right here. That could not have worked out any better than I saw a meme on social media the other day that I think applies to this, where it's you're going to learn more from your failures than you will from your successes, and that really sounds like you you had a lot of opportunity coming through Cowichan, and then you had an even bigger opportunity to learn with the first year in Nanaimo. Does that sound fairly fair?
on the other side of the fence, and you got to learn what's on both sides of the
Mm-hmm.
fence if you plan to live a useful and constructive life.
Absolutely. So we'll pick this up for year two of the Nanaimo adventure. There is a story that I've been told that I have to ask you about the name change, because at some point it went from the Islanders to the Clippers. We'll get into that next time. I would like to thank everybody for listening. And once again, if you want to reach out to me, if you're somebody that has been under Doug's tutelage or mentorship at any point in the last 60 years, it's at the in pod at gmail.com. No spaces, all lowercase, or just find me on Facebook. It's my long hair, double chin face next to a gorgeous puppy dog, and just drop me a personal message, and we will sort that out. I would love to hear from some of the people that you have had under your wing over the years, then and how this is all affected the stories that you guys had together. I'm sure there's more than a few road trip stories in there and shenanigans and whatnot. Other than that, thank you again so much for doing this. I think this is going to be a wonderful thing, and I'm really looking forward to, because as we record this, I still have not put anything out. Um, I think a couple more episodes that I have in the can for some lead time, and we will get this out. So you will be able to, if you're listening to this, you're following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Facebook. Please like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff, and be on the lookout because we're going to get through Doug's resume eventually. It's very long. And we're going to, sort of get into some more mental aspects of the game and some helpful tips. And then hopefully we have some guests involved. So, Dad, thanks again for doing this. I think this has been fantastic. I'm learning things from this era that while I lived through it, I was like 3.5 feet tall, and I don't remember a lot of it, and I definitely was not included in what I used to tell my kids when they were that age. These are grown folk problems. Let me handle it. So all I knew is that kids on the playground would go, "That's the hockey coach's kid," and like, yeah, that's just dad. That's
Uh,
just dad.
Matt,
What do I know?
it's so wonderful to be able to respond to hopefully things that somebody out there needs. But working
Well,
with you,
that's going to be the goal. So we'll continue breaking down Doug's career here for hopefully the next 2 episodes, and then we'll move into some specifics as the hockey season will be ramping up. And I would like to get some of these out in time for maybe some helpful hints for as the beginning of the hockey season is going, because we all know that's a very stressful time for players and families on any level.
coaches
Whether what's that?
and coaches.
Oh, absolutely. I have very one specific story that I cannot wait to break down, which you and I discussed earlier this week. So join us again, follow us, like, subscribe, and by all means share. Let's get this man's knowledge back out for posterity, because I mean he's no spring chicken. I mean I'm old and that's dad. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Doug. And we will see you guys next time on whatever I've named this show because I haven't done it when we recorded it. Bye.
Bye.